And we're live. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Halfway Cafe. I'm Dash MacIntyre, and this is Adrian Polk. We are going to discuss politics. Thanks for joining, everybody. We got a good conversation coming. First up, big news is the ICE protests and chaos. Donald Trump is taking National Guard troops, deploying them in LA. Apparently, Pete Hegseth is considering employing or deploying Marines. Um, is it kind of crazy that 5 months into Trump's presidency, he's already deploying U.S. troops against American citizens?
What are the riots for? I don't even know.
It's like, they're going around and abducting ICE people, or sorry, illegal immigrants from things like Home Depot and like their work sites and things like that. So people are protesting that because of the obvious like lack of due process, the infringement on human rights of sending them to Sikot, like that prison in El Salvador, and just generally giving a kind of fascist vibe.
Yeah, I mean, this is America, so it's legal to protest. So if the protests are getting out of hand, I guess that's one reason to nationalize or call the National Guard, right?
Yeah, but do you think it's a kind of thing that Trump like wants it to get out of hand, and he's going to even direct them to kind of encourage like
Los
the troops
Angeles, of
to?
course, he wants it to happen
Right.
there. Yeah, and Republicans generally, right? That's kind of the governments take advantage of that kind of thing all the time. It's like one person, throws something at a rally or a protest, and then suddenly, oh, we got to crack down. It's like that's kind of routine type of stuff. It's not good.
Right. Do you think the Second Amendment people are really missing their chance to fight back against the tyrannical government that's, not afraid to use arms against the people? And do you also think the "Don't Tread on Me" flag people are also missing a chance to protest against getting tread on?
I think if you're protesting in LA, you should just commandeer those symbols anyway and just take them. If you're gonna
Yeah.
protest like that, don't tread on me. That's a good slogan. It's funny. I don't think I don't know. Republicans are good at sometimes just taking things that aren't really true and just making it their cause. Like, oh, Democrats spend too much. Oh, we're the patriotic party. We care about national
Right.
defense. And I think Democrats should think about taking some of those because it's funny. I don't really think either party is better necessarily than the other. If you look back like 40 years of politics, but I don't think it's. I think it's silly that Democrats let the Republicans take these things that do resonate with a lot of people. Probably doesn't help Democrats electorally.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think about like the idea that Republicans are the ones that are like the daddy party, the tough on like foreign evil empires and foreign policy and things like that. That really hasn't been true since like Reagan. In fact, a lot of the foreign policy we've done has been more isolationist in recent years, certainly under Donald Trump. And then, like you were saying on our last podcast, that the idea that Democrats like spend more than Republicans really isn't true either. So it is kind of like this weird conventional wisdom thing that's just lingering quite a bit longer than is actually really relevant to our politics today.
Yeah, and a lot of individual. That's the weird thing about the populist movement we live in now with Trump is a lot of individual Republican groups, and I don't know, the cleavages within their party. Like they horseshoe politically, like issue to issue. It's not even like the political parties have fringes on both sides that then horseshoe. It's like individual people, and you see that.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Like Elon Musk horseshoes, do you believe in climate change? Yes. Do you want to do something about it? Yeah, we have these electric cars, but then you go hard right on immigration or some other thing. And it's just interesting to see. I think that shows the lack of coherency of, in some ways, the Republican Party as a whole. Because like the RNC, members of Congress, they don't really do a whole lot that's not within the wheelhouse of what Trump has said. So I don't know, it's interesting. And I don't think we've really seen that in American politics probably since, I don't know, FDR or something.
Yeah. There's a lot of good quotes about like ICE kind of going too far. A lot of comments online have been kind of like pointing out that it's hard to fathom that the guy cooking in the back of house like restaurant or the guy making sandwiches like at a bodega, who's illegal but been living here for 30 years, paying taxes. He's got kids who are American now and they're going through school and now getting jobs and being like productive American citizens. Like it's hard to say that those guys are the gang members and terrorists like that are terrorizing society, and then these ICE agents who are going around wearing masks, driving around in like unmarked cars, and then straight up abducting people on the street. Oftentimes, not even wearing like identifying badging and things like that. That those are the good guys and like not the Nazis, But we got to still demonize these people who are just living their best American lives. Just because they came here as children 30 years ago or something.
Well, also like administratively, if you think of going to work, every day in your I don't know if it's true or not. I've heard, and maybe you'll know, but like, do they have quotas for how many people they're supposed to be rounding up every week
I
or
think
month?
they are, yeah. I think that's why
Yeah.
they're going a little bit overkill in terms of like getting people in like the lumber aisle of like Home Depot and stores like that. I think they're really being pressured to get up to the quota and like maximize the number of people. Because I mean, like obviously, if you deport everyone with a criminal record, like immigrants are literally quite a bit safer than natural native-born American citizens. So yeah, if I think it's definitely Stephen Miller just maybe jerking off to like how many, like the kind of deportation porn that he can watch on TV and help gin up.
Yeah. Well, it also shows a lack of priority and prioritization from the people managing the whole department, right? Like, if your stated objective is you're going to go after criminals, gang members, et cetera, people who do violent crime, and then you're just picking up people outside of like immigration and
Yeah, right.
custom court, like that's a terrible prioritization. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, the
I
whole
guess it's
argument
not a
kind
win.
of the whole rationale falls apart when you are arresting and then deporting the people who are going through the process and doing everything legally, and you're literally catching them at their like meetings to prove that they're not committing crimes and they're still going through the process and still identifying themselves as part of the naturalization process. So, not great for American values. Do you think it'll set up though a bigger, like a wider dispute between red states and blue states? Like California is threatening like already Trump is threatening to take away a lot of funding from California, and then California is saying like, well, we're not going to pay federal taxes then, because obviously a lot of blue states pay more into the federal system than they get back. And then states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, they do not have as high taxes, they don't collect as much money for the federal government, and then actually use more services than the average Californian. But we're only 5 months into Trump's second term. We got 3.5 years left to go. Is this the start of like a real, like, is Trump just dividing us along state lines and red state, blue states, as well as, he's been dividing us along religion and like race and gender all along?
I mean, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have really strong opinions on it from that perspective, other than it's like a failure of government strategy to know what you're doing and why, and then prioritize the things you say you care about, prioritize the things you say you're prioritizing, and then
Yeah.
doing something that has the least harmful effect. That's like, that's the thing I hate the most about a lot of governments in general, or just like bad politicians, is like they have an idea, they win an election, so at least some plurality or majority of people wanted it in theory, and then you go about it the worst way possible. And then
Yeah.
it's like, at what point? I mean, it's like, I say this all the time. It's like the magic number 340 million people in this country, and it's like, don't make decisions that just make 180 plus, or like with the tariffs, 340 million people's lives worse for no reason. I don't know. That's like
Yeah.
the libertarian side of me coming out.
Yeah, do you think it's fair to mock the people who are now coming out? Like I think I forget her title. She was like the self-professed like Latino woman for Trump like leader or something, and now she's coming out saying we didn't vote for this, and it's like I think they literally did vote for it. I think a lot of Trump voters literally voted for mass deportations. I don't think Trump or certainly people like Stephen Miller were like hiding the fact that they literally want the country to be less brown. Isn't that like kind of more than anything their ethos? Like
Well, it really
I think
shows.
Trump was all about deporting people.
It really shows the ignorance too, because I think about this all the time. Like, people, oh, we didn't know they were going to do Project 2025, and it's like they said they were,
Yeah.
and then there was like a whole thing they lied about, that they're not going to do it because they had so much blowback. But it's the same thing. People, oh, we voted for him to get the bad immigrants out, and it's like, that's not what they talked about. They literally talked about how we're going to get all Mexicans out of this country, and that, like, Trump may not have said that specifically, but I guess if you don't follow politics at all, you just see something or hear clips on Facebook or something. But I don't know. It's really, there's so many issues where people say, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, even though if you follow politics at all, you kind of
Yeah,
know like
right.
that's what they're going to do. And then also, it's like, I don't know, you can't fault people for not understanding how the government actually works. But like, to some extent, like, if the government's going to do something, it's going to look a certain way just because that's how it works. So it's going to involve the law courts, and some things are challenging, right? If you're going to go find a million people and try to get them out of this country, like, I always joke with people, Obama couldn't get a million people to sign up for free or subsidized healthcare when they didn't have any. And it's like, how are you going to get
Right.
a million people to self-support? It makes no sense. It's
Yeah,
really not how
right.
government works usually.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it was like a slower thing. Obama eventually got a billion people, but definitely to start, I know what you're saying.
Well, I mean, it's a
Um,
joke.
Yeah. This is one thing that annoys me is people who are saying like with these protests and everything, like, oh, it's a false flag or distraction. And I get kind of annoyed. And partly it's a testament of Trump doing so many stupid and illegal and needlessly cruel things. But I mean, like, if you're really arguing, don't get distracted from the real issue of, I don't know what, like the Elon Musk calling Trump a pedophile or like all the other bad things that Trump is doing. Like at a certain point, we just have a shitty president doing a lot of shitty things. So is it really a distraction to move on? When I think in this point, like all of these protesters and like literally you're getting scenes of, that are almost certainly going to get worse of America starting to look like a war zone for no reason. Like I just get a little annoyed when we act like, well, it's like the American like average media reader or news follower that they're the ones being distracted.
Well, I have a
Any thoughts on
question for
that?
you.
Yeah.
My thought, like when you're saying that, is like, to what extent do you think Trump has really got his like fingers on the little threads, right? I don't like when you look at the federal government. I don't think Trump is really puppeteering all these things. It's like if you just put bad people to run an organization, they're going to run it in bad, nefarious ways. Especially if
Right.
they think they have top cover to like break the law or go against the law or do things that the law was not intended for. And so I think you see a lot of that. I wonder, like, Trump is such a popularity seeking person who's like obsessed with his own image that I feel like it's like the debt, right? He doesn't want to take away any programs. He was like, we shouldn't cut Medicare because he doesn't want that on him.
Yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Like he doesn't care what the
He
Republican
wants
Party
people to
is
love
saying
him.
for,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like if it were like brought up to Trump's attention, we can do this way, or this way. And it's like the people he picks pick the worst way, but like that doesn't mean he necessarily would. So I think that's I don't know. Maybe that's a factor if he's not super detail oriented. Maybe uh uh, Gabbard hasn't quite got the fake faux Fox News briefings on what's actually happening in government up to date yet.
Yeah. Right.
Like I don't know. It's a interesting like perspective and exploration of leadership, and presidential leadership so unique, obviously. But I don't know, like tweeting all day is saying something, but it's not necessarily like good policy, and it's not going to be carried out the way you intend.
Yeah. Do you think Trump will chicken out and be a taco again and not go actually full dictator, as in like directing the National Guard to start like shooting a lot of protesters? Like in his first term, he really didn't do anything too crazy until until like the election year when he started going off the rails a little bit with all the protests and reacting badly to them. And then, of course, January 6th. But do you think they're like Donald Trump will not, yeah, with that wanting to be loved thing and getting the bad press? Do you think kind of public opinion will keep him from going too fascist too quickly?
I don't know. I mean, part of it's like you can only get so patches. Like, at what point does the commander on the ground of the National Guard tell his people, like, we're not shooting Americans in the street? And even
Right.
if someone above him says, hey, it's okay, you got top cover, and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
As a commander, do you want
Right.
to be the one issuing that order? Like, probably not. So that's like another funny thing. It's like the courts, right? Like, oh, we're going to put our people in the court. We got three Catholics who are going to, do and be our people on the Supreme Court, and then they don't vote the way you want. And it's like
Right.
the principal agent problem they always talk about. But I don't know. It's kind of funny. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, other than I don't think it's quite as clear cut as they're just going to start shooting people. Thankfully,
Yeah.
right? It's a
That's
good
true.
thing.
Yeah.
And then
And
even
a
if
lot.
they were to like sue something, I was going to get to that, but if they were to shoot someone like in the street, like their family will sue. The National Guard will have to, the
Right.
National Guard has JAGs will have to like, go through the motions. Usually shooting people without like rules of engagement that have been, opportunity, capability, intent. If you don't meet that, like you're not supposed to
Yeah.
shoot people in general. Certainly not Americans. Like you wouldn't do that on the streets of
Right.
Iraq. You wouldn't be doing that in LA. So what happens when the National Guard gets sued or that individual gets sued? Government has to step in. There's going to be courts that weigh in. They're going to say, yeah, that was an illegal order. It turns out it's
Yeah.
illegal. Just because someone says, oh,
Right.
you have top cover doesn't mean you do. And then like,
Yeah.
yeah, are you going to be
And
targeting every individual person who hurts an American citizen on the streets of LA?
right. And Trump kind of set the precedent that, like with Ashley Babbitt, that if you're protesting violently and like, assaulting police officers and then the police shoot you to stop you from doing that and kill you, I guess the precedent is that the family of the victim gets $5 million. So we're going to pay $5 million to everybody. you know, that's a good point. And then quick side note in terms of like the people getting upset and protesting, kind of joining with the Tesla protest. Real quick side note: do you feel bad for all the MAGA fans who bought a Tesla to own the libs now that Elon Musk is having his breakups with Trump?
I don't know. I guess the end result though is cleaner air. Like
Yeah,
wherever you
right.
live, you're not polluting as much. Like I don't know. The I don't even know what to make of it. It's just so funny, right? He kind of burned his bridges with his biggest consumer base, people who care about the environment, electric
Yeah,
cars,
liberals.
full
Yeah,
MAGA, and then he's obviously cutting down that
yeah.
forest as well.
Yeah. Went a little too far into the woke hive mind, ruining Western civilization to the point where like a random Supreme Court election in Wisconsin is like the make or break moment for all of Western civilization.
What is funny because like that's a good thing about like just the way money works is like even spending $250 million on random local elections, like that's not sustainable for the richest person on earth. You can't just keep doing that.
Right.
And then like at what
Yeah.
point are you selling so much Tesla stock? The board is going to be like, hey, since you own so
Yeah,
much
right.
Tesla stock, can you stop selling it and deflating the price? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then going back real quick, one more note on the ICE thing. I was curious, do you think there will ever come a time where we arrest one of these employers, one of the people who's like hiring all these illegal immigrants? Because isn't it a bit of a whack-a-mole situation where we're just trying to arrest and deport all of these migrant workers who come here and find jobs from people willing to look the other way and pay them less, and just not have to follow labor rights if they don't, or if they're not concerned about their workers, kind of like suing them or complaining to the government? Will there ever be a day where, like these giant companies that hire all these illegal immigrants pay some legal consequence instead of just blaming the workers coming here to try to, make a good life and make money for the families?
that'd be interesting. I wonder if a lot of times there's like a plausible deniability. Like if you're a company, you'd be like, yeah, they come in, we pay them cash. I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Would that hold up in
Right.
court? Like, the other
Yeah, I
funny
guess
thing too
that's
is like that's like the funny thing about people who don't know how to run government is like usually the simplest solution for a public policy problem is some kind of tax subsidy or something to incentivize people to do something or not do something.
right.
We want people to own home like houses. Why don't we give a little tax credit? You buy a house and you can deduct blah 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 and all that stuff. So like you would think like if the people coming here for jobs just had less access to jobs because if you're a company that hired illegals, you'd get fined out the fuck, Like I think that would solve the problem without having ICE just abduct people off the streets. Which it's like really funny. Do you think of like self defense in public kind of thing? Like if people come up to you masked with like guns and stuff, like I don't know if I'd necessarily trust like just if that like oh that's a government employee trying to abduct me off the street. That's normal. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
People packing heat. Like I would think like I would personally, if someone was trying to like abduct me and put me in a van, like I would probably shoot at someone, right? You talk about capability, opportunity, intent. It's like you're just minding your own business in public. There's no
Yeah,
reason
right.
anyone should be trying to abduct you. And like, they've done this to people who are full American citizens and it'll probably happen again. So
Yeah. Do you think
it's
it'll be
really
way
dangerous
harder?
for ICE when, I mean, you could, to my point
Yeah.
earlier, you could literally just fine, like just businesses knowing that they'll get fined if they're caught with hiring illegal immigrants. Like that would solve probably 80% of the problem, maybe more.
Right.
And that you'll have unscrupulous like companies who continue doing it, but you find them and you find them.
Yeah, right. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts on the kind of ICE kerfuffles? Oh, I was going to say this. Do you think it'll be ultimately harder for ICE to do that kind of stuff in like a state like Florida where you have like stand your ground laws where someone's like unmarked car trying to abduct you, like, in terms of like
Yeah,
impeding
exactly.
and yeah, like,
Now, you
yeah,
ever see that like college humor video of the guy? It's like a fake NRA like commercial, and it's like two white guys like talking about their God given right to pack heat, and then a black guy goes like, "Oh yeah,
oh,
me
yeah,
too," and he's got a gun.
yeah,
Like,
right.
hey, where do you live again? He's like, that was
Yeah,
my
yeah,
background check, and it's like,
right.
I wonder how many people like all those poor HR people in ICE offices, people coming up the street. I want to work for ICE. It's like, why do you want to do that? No reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Just knowing that that's the organization you work for. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a kind of funny note too, because obviously there's that famous moment in California politics in the '70s when Reagan was governor, and like some of the like real big gun control issues were taken advantage of when the Black Panthers like started packing heat and walking down the streets with like machine guns and stuff like that. So I've kind of made jokes about that quite a bit before, but it probably would do a lot more for gun control if just like every Black person started buying a gun and open carrying, like permitless open carrying and scaring a lot of people. Like, I guess if you're black and you're liberal and you want less guns on the street, I guess, that might be an effective way to help like
No,
scare the white
that's what I
people.
was saying. I think that like Democrats and people on the left should just start stealing and like what's the term? Culturally appropriating all the stuff Republicans like. And it's like if you
Yeah.
could dye your hair blue and get a bunch of tattoos, you should also walk into a gun shop, get a gun, and start packing heat. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
I think
right.
it'd be funny. If with your all those people with those weird like anime stickers on their cars, like put an American flag up there too. Fuck it.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I don't know.
Don't tread on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, and I don't know what you think about this. I always think it's funny with all of our stupid culture wars. Like, I think there's like a silver lining, which is that, like, if we're all being crybabies about the same shit, at least it's like promoting the uniculture of like every American
Yeah,
across this
right.
massive landmass is like being a crybaby about the same stuff. Like, maybe that's a positive in the end. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it day to day, but I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Now I have a point to kind of talk about with the big beautiful bill. I had this idea that like you know, is it starting to catch up to Republicans, the alternate reality that they live in because of just so many lies, right? Like if you go back to like George W. Bush with the weapons of mass destruction, all the lies that got us into Iraq from Afghanistan, Obama takes over and he's like a Muslim Kenyan terrorist. Obamacare is going to lead to death panels, like all these things that are not true. And then you get to Trump, who just lies like literally 100 times a day, and he gives a speech and he'll give like, like almost every other sentence will have some lie wildly inaccurate half truth in it. A big one is climate change. Like we're just getting more and more climate related disasters that are not stopping. And then like every record of like a warmer atmosphere and warmer oceanic currents means more tornadoes, more hurricanes, and they just keep getting worse. So like now with like things like ICE, like we're only deporting criminals. More and more people are saying that's not true. And like, these neighbors that have lived in the community for 30 years, making everyone happy are being deported. It's like, that's not what I voted for. And then like, Trump saying the January 6th rioters did nothing wrong. And now the build back, or sorry, I keep wanting to say build back better. The big, beautiful bill of Trump's is that it won't increase the debt. It won't cut Medicare and all these things that are just blatant lies. But do you think that'll finally catch up to Republicans now? Will it kind of stand
No.
with no? Like the Lindsey
No, I mean,
Graham
like,
quote that if we go with Trump, we'll be ruined. That won't finally catch up to them.
I don't know. Like, I mean,
Because
I
like, how
can.
do you have a country? Ultimately, how do you have a country when like 30% of the electorate, like the hardcore MAGA voters who will vote MAGA no matter what, like when 30% of America's people just believe insane conspiracies and shit that's like blatantly not true? How do you have a country? How do you have a democracy? Like,
Yeah,
isn't that why we're like going off the rails a little bit? Like they
yeah,
just kind of you watch Fox News all day and you're not living in the same reality of somebody who's like apolitical or watches CNN or maybe just sees all three of them like in a line at the gym. Like you're not are we all living in the same country anymore?
I mean, I don't know. Historically, isn't Americans right to just believe whatever the hell they want? If you go back, I, obviously the 21st
Yeah, I
century
guess
is
so.
different than the 19th century, but like there used to just be straight up newspapers that were completely in the bag for one politician in one state, let alone a whole political party. So I don't know.
That's true, but it's a matter of degree. Like I grant you that it's not different. That like when we used to have just small publications, and every town had like 30 newspapers that were all just competing with each other, and then just writing like straight insane stuff. Like, is that first off? It's not that different than the internet now, where you can have like you can make a website called like Freedom Eagle Guns Second Amendment.com and just post like all kinds of trash. Like that's not different. But isn't the social media and the internet kind of like ubiquitous, digital culture that we're living through? Isn't it like a degree worse than ever before?
I mean, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't even touch ground with reality.
Yeah. Do you like the term touch go outside and touch grass? Or does that
Yeah,
offend you?
I mean, it's good. I recommend
Do you
it.
think more
Anyone
people should
listening,
follow that advice?
I'm doing it more and more.
That's good. Yeah.
Get a dog and force yourself to be outside for 3 hours a day.
Yeah,
It's
that's
helpful.
true.
Yeah.
And probably, there's the loneliness epidemic. I think more people need to just go outside and like be around other people in general. But
Yeah, and it's funny because like culturally people don't do that anymore. And if you are the kind of person who goes outside to talk to people, you're kind of a fucking weirdo. So I think a lot of people need to do it before we culturally shifted to like normal times where it's not like a psychopath who talks to you in public. But I don't know.
that's a little extreme, but
No, I mean, like, if someone came up to you and you were at like Target and just started talking to you, wouldn't you be a little bit like, oh, damn, this is weird. I want to leave now.
Well, it depends on the context. Are you in the middle of the aisle and they just talk to you there, or is it like you're just waiting in line and like you have the same product that someone will mention or something? You know what I mean?
No, I don't know. Agree to disagree. To some extent,
Okay.
any context is weird that someone comes up to you and talks to you for the most part, right? Maybe I've been on the East Coast too long. It's definitely East Coast type thing. Fewer people
Yeah,
talking.
maybe. I guess the jobs I do are just so public facing that like my job is
Oh
just to
yeah,
stand there and for people to come up and talk to me about
yeah.
whatever.
Your job is unrepresentative of most people's.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Um, okay, moving on. What do you think about the kind of kerfluffles with Jake Tapper's new book calling out Joe Biden? Is it good that like Trump is doing all this crazy shit and CNN is spending so much time on like the previous president being too old, arguably, for the job?
Well, I mean, I think the problem is like it's asymmetric where Democrats can talk about how Biden obviously should have been president and he was kind of old person moronic, behavior or self belief that you should at 86 still be president when you're already declining. So that's bad. The problem is it's like how long do you dwell on it? Like, A,
Right.
he's no longer president, so and nothing bad happened, right? Like the country
Yeah.
didn't
Right.
collapse. He didn't launch nuclear weapons. Like he didn't, shit himself on TV that we know of, right? Like so. I mean, that goes back. I wanted to talk about this later, but like the idea that Republicans are still obsessed with like the summer of 2020 and how their whole political ideology is like not taking into account anything past COVID. They're still stuck in COVID.
Yeah, that's
Liberals
true.
bad,
Right.
liberals bad, blah 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 blah. But at the same time, like I don't know, you have to move on. So like do like obviously for a lot of Democrats, they, would have probably voted for a dog over Trump, let alone,
I
Biden
would
who's
have.
really old.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
have voted for a pile of shit.
Yeah. But the asymmetric part of it is if Trump were to shit his pants on live TV, you'd have like 80% of Republicans on social media saying that's what alpha men do. And it's like, that's so preposterous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
You're
like,
just not seeing an alpha man with big balls relieve himself wherever he wants, you know?
yeah. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like things happen to people and it's really important. And then you kind of grow up. I don't know. The danger of having a cult of personality is like now the entire Republican Party is subsumed by people who have only gotten relevance, political power, and a lot of times money thanks to the corruption. Like in
Yeah.
the 8 year period between 2016 and now or whatever. So like now you've got this whole crazy thing where like it is obvious it was asymmetric before between Democrats and Republicans being willing to criticize their own side, but now it just won't happen because of the cult of personality type thing going on. So it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. Can Democrats claim one for one we're even now after Ronald Reagan kind of had, I guess at this point, a little well documented kind of dementia issues and obviously had Alzheimer's like after leaving office. And,
Yeah,
you
but
could
for the
say,
record, Ronald Reagan was a serious person and he was doing things to peacefully end the Cold War, which was very positive in
well, I'm
1986.
comparing him to Biden. Wouldn't you also say Biden was a serious person doing things
Oh,
too?
yeah.
I'm not comparing him to Trump. I'm saying one for one, Biden for Reagan. They both maybe had some old age dementia things that, again, thankfully with Reagan, there wasn't, I guess, nuclear war with the Soviets. So, at
Yeah.
least there's
I think
that.
one of the problems, and I've been thinking about this a lot, it's just like you're we're so polarized it will never happen. But I think that there ought to be like some kind of unifying thought process between people in general across the political parties. Like we're just like, yeah, we don't accept corruption. Like if you have naked corruption and you're just getting money while you're president and you're like making billions of dollars, like even if you're a Republican and the Republicans in office, like that should not be okay. And it's the same thing. Like, oh, you're going to talk about not following the law or like a Supreme Court decision if it doesn't go your way. Like everybody should collectively be against that. And the biggest thing is like, oh, we're plucking people randomly off the street and sending them to other countries, including like trying to take them to Libya and South Sudan, which are
Yeah.
failed states. Or and it's like
Right.
why is any American okay with that? I mean, it's stupid, but it'll never happen because, frankly, I don't know. If a Democrat was doing that, there'd probably still be 40% of people who'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's a good idea," but I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
I'm trying to create a utopia that will never happen, but I don't know. I think it would be better for this country and the world if people just like actually had a hill that they'd be willing to like tiptoe on. No one's saying you have to die on any particular hill, but like maybe people should collectively be against things like corruption, breaking the law, not following the law, doing, misguided things that are stupid, not based on anything. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Is that too utopian?
I guess. I mean, you hear the quotes like from Republicans that behind the scenes they are kind of writing legislation, like the Supreme Court, the conservative judges have been a little bit less like accepting of the legal theory that the president should be a monarch and we should go to a more monarchic system. And obviously, I think there's probably a lot of conversations we don't know about between like Republican senators and maybe Supreme Court justices and lawyers and things like that. So, I mean, um, obviously, even with the tariffs, like there's some pushback from Republicans, and I'm not sure, like the Senate approved that thing where it's like you have to you know you can do a tariff for like 60 days and then it has to be approved by the Senate, so like kind of on the margins they're doing something to kind of rein it in, but you're right, they're not really sticking their neck out and just like calling a spade and being like, yeah, it's bad when the president just deports people and then to countries that they don't live in. That like nowhere in the Constitution, in the spirit or the like letter of the law, is that okay and should be allowed. um do you think Democrats, though, in terms of Biden's kind of mental acuity issues, do you think in 2028 Democrats will have some issues in the primary dealing with that, and certainly the general election of like, what did you know? When did you know it?
Well,
What did you overlook?
I mean, maybe
Is it
like
fair?
I don't know. It's weird. I'm trying to think like not that I'm being hypocritical in any way, but like if you're working for the White House and like you don't even see Biden that much, like it's probably easy to delude yourself and they're like, hey, that was weird. That wasn't a that seemed
Yeah,
odd.
right.
It's like, oh, Biden doesn't do a lot of that. That's kind of weird. But so I think there's like maybe a little bit of plausible deniability factored in there, but like um yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. Like I don't know if Biden should have like resigned, but like the idea that like he was going to run for reelection and be president for
Yeah,
4 more years was stupid. So like,
yeah,
you know, I don't know. There's like a gray area for like being demented and old in your first term, but like thinking you can run again is pretty black and white
yeah,
in my
right.
mind. So
Yeah.
I mean,
I have.
and I don't know, like
Yeah, go ahead.
Democrats saying that, like, oh, he should run again. He's our party standard. Like, he should be the president. He can be president at 86, and I think that was like kind of stupid and misguided. But that's like the problem with like Washington D.C. and our political system is like the president has all the power. People's jobs are tied up to him
Yeah,
personally. Like,
right.
if you take like Josh Shapiro, let's say hypothetically he wins the White House in 4 years, like he's gonna be bringing a ton of people from the Northeast or Pennsylvania, people he knew or grew up with, or
Right,
people who
right.
are like him, like anyone who's spent around, like I don't know, Delaware following Biden for 30 years is not gonna have a job. So like I
Yeah,
get
right.
there's and that goes into the whole like maybe you should not be doing things strictly for your own self benefit and career if you're working for 340 million other people, but that's just the ideologue in me, I guess.
Yeah. I have this idea that like at a certain point when the government is so big and like the president, you can kind of get away with the president
Define
kind of
so
doing.
big. What do you mean?
Well, as in, like, the government is so big with so many different departments and agencies and, like, literally, like, a million some odd employees across, like, all the various functions, right? Like, at a certain point, the president does have a lot of ceremonial duties, and I guess Biden and even Trump now kind of proves you can get away with, like, the president focusing more on some ceremonial things, right? Like, Trump is not calling up Congress people and, like, debating on the merits of very specific issues with his, like, budget bill, right? Trump does not read anything to the point where like they can't even get him to like read his own presidential daily briefing and learn what's going on in the world. So at a certain point, it's very obvious that the US president can get away with being a old man that's, maybe not capable of, working 8 hours every day and like waking up with the 3 a.m. hotline phone call about like nuclear war going off, right? And then Trump kind of proves that you don't have to know anything about anything and you just go around with the yes men and just pointing at random things that you want to do because they make you look good on TV, but have no basis in improving our like actual society or economy or, being good for, or even following the law. So like, and I had this idea too that like the president is kind of much more monarchic anyway versus a lot of other governments. Like certainly in Europe, like we were the first democracy, but then democracies kept developing and innovating. And certainly you look at a lot of like European governments with prime ministers and proportional governments made up of many parties. They're constantly angling about little things and constantly having to come to consensus and make a coalition to rule. Like America doesn't really do that. We have the first past the post system, one president that gets all the power if they get 50% and one vote or a plurality, right? So like we really do have kind of a odd government. And in many ways, because we are are so important, and we have developed such a, some people would call it the deep state, but this like giant umbrella organization that, makes sure the water's clean, the pork is safe to eat, milk's not filled with maggots, that, building highways and like everything like that. Like, I mean, I guess maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but it's funny that you can get away with like having just a complete idiot or old man president.
Well, I mean, think of it this way, right? Like, if your policy stance on North Korea is you're going to fall in love with the leader of North Korea, like, why do you need the State Department?
Yeah,
Like, having a
right.
big government and agencies that do all this research, like, isn't it kind of redundant if you're just going to do whatever you want anyway? Like, I mean, in this country, there used to be the idea, and Biden had it. There was a he had a rig on first turn, continuing now, where it's just like American politicians would keep doing policies because they were based on something that made sense in the past, and you keep doing them and you try to improve them slightly as you can, not just completely throw it all out and be like, fuck it, I'm going live.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And
Rip
so,
up every trade agreement ever just because your
yeah.
predecessors did
In
it.
that way, I mean, because you mentioned how other parliamentary systems in Europe, they actually have way more power than the U.S. president does, which is kind of funny. In some ways, like the U.S. government is the most democratic because you need super majorities of every little thing, every part of the government to do anything, right? Like if you want to build, you
Yeah,
have to have a
which is
majority of the
another.
committee, you have to have a committee of
Yeah,
the House.
which is another good point that the presidency could become more ceremonial because there's just so many people doing the things that really matter. And then, like in Congress now, we've gotten to the point where, like, every party, if you get the full government, you get like a year to do one giant reconciliation package and cram in as much as you like humanly can to the point that no one reads any of the bills anymore. And you're basically just voting like last second before like a budget, like the debt ceiling, like totally cripples the economy and makes us default all of our debt. Like all of this process is not very good, right?
Well, on the other hand, America's number one in the world, right? And with the biggest
Yeah,
economy, it's not.
yeah, I guess so. We're like, yeah, struggling along.
I mean, obviously,
Um,
correlation does not equal causation, and that obviously the way in which certain administrations run themselves is not necessarily conducive to the most amount of goodness. Like, I would imagine that whatever the GDP ends up being for this year, it probably would have been a little higher if not for the tariffs. So,
yeah, right.
yeah, interesting to think about.
Yeah. We talked about a little bit last time how it's really like Congress is to blame because they're not really taking seriously their responsibilities from the Constitution. And obviously, a Congress should, like both parties in theory, should be united against an executive president trying to take more power from them, things like declaring war or tariffs or all these agreements and things like that. Like obviously Republicans aren't going to, tell Trump not to do something. But I had another idea about executive orders. What do you make of the kind of system that we have now that because Congress is so incompetent and ineffective and cowardly and doesn't want to put their name to anything that might like hurt them in their next reelection? What does it say about our government that so much policy now is purely decided by presidents with executive orders that are kind of not really laws, but are still binding in terms of the executive function? And of course, we talked last time that like Congress just keeps letting the executive branch have more functions of government and do more stuff with less oversight because they don't really get involved and they don't really update the laws and they don't really, improve the systems that their predecessors created in the first place. Like all these agencies that are just, working off of agency rules and things like that that were set in like the 70s or the 40s or even earlier. What do you think about that? That like so much of our government's run by executive order. And then, of course, every party complains about it from, if Republican is in office, Democrats complain about the executive orders, and Republicans spent the entire Obama years calling him a wannabe king. I call Trump a wannabe king, and he's doing dumb shit with executive orders. What do you make of all this?
I don't know. It's weird. In some ways, it's like people say, I want the government to be run like a business, and executive orders are kind of like the CEO making policy
Right.
decisions within a company. Um, I think it is kind of funny because like Trump will pass executive orders saying we're going to ban straws, but it only applies to the executive branch. So then, like in theory, the
Yeah.
executive branch giving contracts
Right.
to a building
Yeah.
and they're going to put a Starbucks in it, and like, do they have to not have straw? Like they have to
Yeah.
have
Right.
plastic straws?
Yeah.
It's
The
strange. Like,
biker bar on like Daytona Beach still has straws.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, it's like in some ways, it's annoying because Congress isn't doing their job, and then like a lot of executive orders are just like, um, uh, just I don't know, trying to make your base happy. Like put I mean, I think Democrats were guilty of this, and I would like to know your opinions. But like the idea of like you're gonna have all this money that goes to building chip fabrication for computer chips here in America, and we're gonna put all this money towards it, but you better have a facility where there's daycare for like your employees. And it's like I don't know how many people who work at like high-end chip fabs, like manufacturing and design and engineering,
Yeah.
they're probably not hurting for like childcare the way that like poorer people in like less lucrative businesses
Yeah.
are. So I think
But
like
that's
in
just
that
one
way,
example. I think the bigger argument against like what Democrats often do is like they write into a lot of their bills like so much percentage of labor has to be unionized, so much has to be in these rural like at-risk communities. Like not that they do full on quotas, but obviously like a lot of the highlighting job interviews and things like that, should be a certain percentage women, a certain percentage of ethnic minorities, things like that. Where then at the end of the day, it's like the executive orders are so onerous that you can't actually build the thing because where are you going to find union labor with these demographics in this one community? And then you put it in this community and now it's not connected to anything and it's in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, is it really that effective of a way to build the things that you want and make it effective for the economy at large?
yeah, I mean it's just silly. It's administrative burden for any company wanting that money. So like, and then on top
Yeah,
of that,
right,
like, there's got to be some kind of administrator who has to be able to check that like all those wickets are met before they can dole the money out. And then what kind of delay does that create?
yeah,
And then you have people whose whole
right,
job. I don't know. I read this funny book called Bullshit Jobs one time. And it's kind of humorous. And
yeah,
it's just talking about like people who have jobs like that don't need to exist. Like, and if your job is basically to work for the government to like look through a checklist to make sure that the percentage union work, the percentage blah 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 is met.
right.
It's like why that's probably not a job that needs to be paid like 75,000 a year. But I don't know, soapbox right there.
Yeah, and kind of with the inefficiencies of government, like there's a big thing that Ezra Klein always talks about that like basically you have within the laws that certain things need to be like certain checkoffs, a checklist of things you need to do before building things or enacting any policy, and then it gets to the point where you just get sued so often that government agencies when they're enacting something they have to like check every box, cross every T, dot every I to the point where it takes like 2 years of just researching everything, having these massive reports that I guess somebody still has to read, saying that they tried everything they could do to follow every single rule. And then, that's kind of the part of the thing where we just don't build anything anymore. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean to some extent it's an administrative burden. And I think like I don't know if
Right.
you'd agree with this, but I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna tear down a bridge and build a new bridge where the old bridge was, like, well, I understand that there could be like runoff from some construction materials and that may be bad, but like if you're gonna build something in the middle of like DC, which is just like look at a freaking map or a picture of a satellite, it's like just a big city. So like if you're gonna build a building in the middle of the big city, like is it really gonna harm the environment that much? Like I think you should probably I don't know. That's like a zoning power thing. I think it'd be interesting if the federal government gave zoning board members like the power to be like, this is so developed already. We're not going to like kill all kinds of species, uh, because they're living in a city among humans anyway. And it's like maybe we should just waive some of that stuff. I don't know. Um, but that goes back to the point, Congress. I find it hard to believe that 10 Democrats wouldn't sign on in the Senate to some reasonable reform of like NEPA or environmental permitting or something. And even in the state level, like, are there really not, a small number of Democrats would be willing to make it so a state could like build more and make more money and become richer and more competitive than other states? I find that hard to believe, but Congress doesn't do anything anymore, so that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, and it's bad politics for Democrats, especially because they're the ones who love process, and a lot of their big bills and efforts do tend to build in a lot of bureaucracy and process. But then it gets to the point where, yeah, it's like it takes 2 years to figure out if like some bird is going to be affected or the runoff, or if not enough union labor, and then 2 years later, all of your campaign promises, none of them came true because you just built in so much bureaucracy and policy like checklists that like now nothing gets done. You're viewed as ineffective, and then the American people vote in a fascist who just says, fuck everybody, I'm going to do what I want and it'll be fast and you're going to love it, I promise. So it's a little
Yeah.
self-defeating for Democrats. And then kind of on that note, another thing self-defeating for Democrats, Ken Martin, the DNC chair, he said recently he doesn't know if he wants to do the job still. And I don't know how serious that comment was or if he was just frustrated. But apparently, there's a lot of infighting around David Hogg and then some of the maybe more liberal elements of the groups, like the quote unquote, the groups of the Democratic Party. And does this spell bad for Democrats now that they're in a little bit of a wilderness period? Or will they come together like they did in like 2005, 2006, and then, take back the House in 2028? Will they figure out their shit, the Democrats, or will they be self-destructive and infighting and once again help lead to fascists winning again?
Yeah, I feel like honestly the DNC needs to find someone who's like Trump and just put him in to make noise. Like I think like
Well,
the
what do you think
fact
about
that
New York
they're
City? Is Andrew Cuomo the guy to do that in New York City, or should we have the more liberal guy, like a more liberal candidate? Is he like just a like fuck you, I'm going to do what I want and get it done that like will make Democrats look effective, or will that go against
well, I
all
think the
the
problem with
ideals that we
Democrat
have?
strategy in general is they try to be inclusive of all kinds of groups and then they lost among all the major ethnic minorities. So like their plan fucking sucked. It was stupid. It
Yeah,
didn't
right.
work. And it's like I
Yeah,
get being inclusive and like this is the thing I kind of hate. Like if you're the kind of person who cares about whether or not we include marginal groups of society, the Democrats are gonna do that. You're not gonna accidentally elect a Democrat who's like, oh, I hate Mexicans. Like that's just not gonna happen.
yeah, right.
Meanwhile, there are real Republicans saying that. So, like, the whole idea that, like, I don't know, it just stop. I mean, it's a messaging thing, right? Like, the fact, like, everything that ever comes out of the DNC is stupid, right? And I don't even know anything about the DNC.
And poll
I'm
tested
roughly
to
familiar.
death.
Yeah, I'm a little aware that, like, David Hogg tried to, like, have some kind of test or wanted to have some kind of incentive to get old people out of the party or at least positions of power. And, like, yeah, I'm all for that. And I think, like, until they start, like, actually, I don't know. They need to internalize some of the lessons of the last couple of elections because they haven't learned any of them and they're just going to lose again. And that's bad because if you care about the environment, you should do whatever it takes to win the White House. If you care about X, Y, and Z issue, you should try to make sure you have someone who has a legitimate and real chance of winning their House seat or their Senate seat or a governor's
Yeah,
race.
that's interesting. I guess you could compare it to like the Sister Soldier moment with Bill Clinton, or the kind of thing where a candidate tells like some of the more extreme elements of their greater coalition, like "shut the fuck up" and you're making us all look bad, that kind of
And
thing.
and it doesn't even have to. They should just do what Republicans do. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to cut taxes and it's going to make everyone better off. Don't tell them that it's really for the rich. Like that's literally
Yeah,
what they
right.
do. Like Democrats should
Uh
do that
huh.
too. Democrats will instead will be like, oh, we're going to do this because it helps this tiny little group of people that like Republicans hate. They don't want to help and like, but I don't know. I'm kind of rambling right there. I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, no,
the
no. Like I like that point because it's like the biggest thing in like 2020 with the debates is just like everybody, like all the Democrats lined up is like raise your hand if you think illegal immigrants who are arrested and are sitting in prison should get taxpayer dollars to pay for transgender surgeries. And it's like watch it, everybody raise their hands. Like shut the fuck up. Stop asking that question. Stop raising your hand. Like I think trans people should be able to understand that Democrats will do more for you, even if they are not making themselves lose elections by letting those issues that affect such a small group of people dominate the entire political debate of like a half hour of the DNC debate while we're running against fascists who like don't believe trans people exist, wants to arrest them or ban all their books and block them from using the names and pronouns that they want to use. Right? I don't know.
well, I
Part
think
part of it is yeah. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say to add to that, I think that's these are a bunch of really important problems that Democrats need to fucking like think about. The other one is just like I don't know why people running for president have to have an opinion on everything. Like when like
Yeah, that's a good point.
I am pro like trans rights. I don't want trans people to feel uncomfortable. I think we should accommodate them as a society. However, if you tell me, and if I were to run for president, that a trans woman like athlete won a race among high school women. And it's like, I think if you're running for president, you should say, that sounds like an interesting story for a local city in Arizona to give a fuck about, but I don't, right? Like, I think
Right.
the amount of issues that the president and the people running for president say or pretend or think
That's a
they
good
need to
point.
care
Yeah.
about, like, I don't know, like, we're not talking about like civil rights where there's an entire segment of the country where people are treated as second class citizens or whatever. And it's like, as long as you're not hurting like trans people, like, I don't understand why the federal government needs to get involved in something that a local level school board could get involved in. That's just my like high horse, I think. I don't know.
No, that's a good
What are your
point. I
thoughts?
think Democrats get in trouble where they basically kind of get caught like giving lip service to every group, but then obviously you get into government and like Iran is threatening a nuclear war or something, like you can't get involved in the local school boards, trans athlete issue, right? Like I guess it does, and maybe that sets up the problem with Democrats politically is that they do lip service for all these groups and then they get into office and don't do anything. And I guess, you could say that's a valid reason to not vote for the Democratic Party. But again, I think if you're liberal at all, I think it is better to have Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris being president. You'll get more of what you want than Donald Trump, right? No matter what group you are, right? If you're not a white male Christian that like Republicans seem to exclusively cater to, right?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's like Hillary Clinton and Obama saying in 2007 that they were against gay marriage. It's like, no, they fucking weren't, but they said
Yeah,
that.
right.
You know what I mean? Like maybe Democrats should lie a little more. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I do like that point. I do think it would be good if, yeah, if more often Democratic candidates were just like, I don't necessarily care about that issue. And I don't know if we need to devote a whole segment in this DNC debate to something like that, like to illegal immigrants who are in prison getting taxpayer, paid sex changes in prison. Like, I don't know if that necessarily should be an issue we need to like bury ourselves in the weeds on.
Well, it's also
Um,
silly. It's a weird lack of judgment among people. Like, well, I don't know how to phrase that better, but like the idea that like I'm not saying like if you have a member of your family who's trans or anything and trying to compete in sports, or you're a family member who's actively getting beat by a trans person, like that's a weird situation. But like, let's say you're in Ohio and you're just some random person who loves Trump, and like, why do you care that in California there's a 17-year-old athlete doing X, Y, or Z, and then you get so, and then it's also like it's such a weird and probably bad judgment thing for the president of the United States to be tweeting about a 17 or an 18-year-old in some random town in America. Like that makes no sense. Or like members of Congress, if you're the senator of like, I don't know, pick a state, like Montana or something, and you're having a really strong opinion about something happening in a local school district in some town in like, Virginia. It's like, I don't know. But it just seems weird to me. I don't know why people care so much. And I guess it's weird because it drives our politics, and that's what culture wars are all about. But
Yeah.
it
I
just
mean, I
seems
guess
strange.
you can't argue that it wasn't a successful wedge issue essentially, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I get why Republicans bring it up constantly, but then yeah, I don't think Democrats should wrap themselves around the axle for that. Um,
Well, it's also I don't know, this is a polarizing comment, but I also feel like, to some extent, like high school sports, like, what does it really matter that much? And then college sports, what does it really matter that much? And like getting first place or second place, what does it matter that much? And like, people say, oh, it can be about scholarships. And it's like, well, if you get second place, you can probably still get a scholarship, right? And it's like, I don't know, there's matters of degree and there's stuff on the margins there, but it just seems so strange that like you are actively making millions of people's lives worse, right? Like whatever the percentage of trans people are, the way they're impacted by the culture around them, like all of that because like, someone won a swim race, like it seems so trivial to me.
Yeah, and of course the media doesn't help. Like, if you imagine how much money Fox News made from advertisements while doing segments about like high school trans athletes and things like that, like how many billions of, maybe not billions, but like, tens of millions of dollars from advertising that instead of like, people getting arrested on the street or real foreign policy problems or any of the problems in our economy and society, like, that's what Fox News, like the number one source of news for like roughly half of the ideological spectrum of America, should dedicate all its time to. But
Yeah,
again, it works for the Republican Party. So, I guess I know why they do it. I just
your
don't agree
earlier
with them
point,
doing it.
if you care about these issues at all, like you should vote Democrat because you're the party that's actively not trying to make trans people's
Yeah,
lives
right,
worse.
right. And then, to let the fascists win because they are not directly, giving lip service to like your
Yeah.
ability to get a sex change in prison
Like,
while you're illegal immigrant. It's like such a great issue to, I don't know, point out.
well, it's an issue where there's not like necessarily a best answer, and there's definitely some wrong ones though. And I feel
Yeah,
like
right.
actively abetting the party that's going to do the worst outcomes is probably not good. Bad strategy, but let's move on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Speaking of bad outcomes, let's give a little update to the Trump
We just got
administration. What?
go on. Not it.
Um, so there's an interesting little discrepancy now. This is kind of going off of Elon Musk claiming that Donald Trump is a pedophile and apparently admitting that he helped spend $300 million to elect a pedophile. Kash Patel, FBI director, who Funny little shout out. There was that recent interview where he looked really tiny in that giant chair with Brett Baer. Just kind of a funny thing. If anyone saw it, little shout out to that. Kash Patel really seems like a guy that's just not right for the job, right? Right? Like, what's your impression of Kash Patel? Does he seem like a man who can meet the moment running the entire FBI? Does he seem like he has the background? Like he's taking the private plane to his girlfriend's house and going
He
to
kind
like
of talks. He
UFC
seems like a
fights?
slimy little rat.
He just,
No, I mean, it's like
that's,
it's like
that's a good way to put it.
the people we hold up in society is like such a reflection of our culture. And like, look at George Washington and the example he set. But like,
Right.
it's also like Robert Mueller showed up every single day to work with a white shirt and wouldn't wear a different color shirt because he cared so desperately about taking the FBI seriously and the work that they do.
Right.
And like, it's like, then you have Cash Patel. It's like, just, I don't know, as a culture,
Going on Joe Rogan and going to UFC fights.
yeah, like we've lost the sense that like there should be
Yeah.
serious people acting serious when they're doing
Right.
serious things at serious
And that's
places.
and you were talking about that a little bit earlier, that you get all these people where now just their entire careers and all their money and all their friends come from just like proximity to power that they get from either their political party or their candidate, in this case Donald Trump. But like,
Well, it's like I
like
used to
would
love those
Kash
like
Patel have a career in the FBI if it wasn't for Donald Trump? Would anybody hire Stephen Miller to be a White House advisor? Like, you get all these losers who are just kind of suck ups, and then you get like a fascist like Trump, like with a narcissism problem that just wants to be loved, so he attracts all of these people, right? And then he just loves that they're telling him, he's like walking around naked, but his clothes are so beautiful, and like, you know, his scent is so amazing, and he doesn't smell like shit like everyone else will say.
well, I would say that like to some degree it's like people would not be picked just from like the judgment of the things they care about and say and talk about. Like if you're going out of your
Right.
way so much to make immigration the most important issue and making immigrants' lives miserable or making trans people's lives miserable, to me it shows like such a lack of judgment of what you ought to be talking about and taking seriously. But I mean, that's just I don't know. Our culture is kind of like that now. So
Yeah, unfortunately, we're to the point where like everyone in positions of power, it's like their real goal is to kind of become like a podcast. It's like the media, prior it was like getting a lot of hits on cable news and being on TV, and now it's like everybody wants to be like a podcast host
but it's
essentially,
ironic because
like
it's actually
us.
reaching people, right? Like if you did not do the podcast, how many people would ever hear about some
Yeah,
Democratic
right.
senator from, pick a state, Rhode Island? Like, do I even know both Democratic senators from Rhode Island off the top of my head? Probably not. And like like
White House is one, I think. I don't know the other.
yeah. Well, the other thing too is like if you're gonna go to a podium on C-SPAN and talk, no one's gonna hear you. So to some extent, you have to meet the people where they are, and they're
Right.
mostly listening to podcasts. And obviously, like the hot take is like the thing now that gets people's attention and clicks, and like
Yeah.
it's like anything else. Like before the internet, people would chain themselves to trees to get the word out about conservation. Like it was kind of weird, but like you got to do something. So I don't know. I don't necessarily begrudge like the social media aspects of it, but it's also just people showing their terrible true selves and talking about terrible things.
Yeah, but the social media aspect really lets people get ahead for all of the wrong reasons, right? Like, should Nancy Mace be a senator, or not a senator, a representative? Like, just constant, like, even her staff has high turnover. Apparently, she's running bot farms. So, like, she's probably just tweeting things out and then running an army of like fake accounts that just like her and share all her stuff. Like, is that person in government and public service for the right reasons?
No,
Running a bot farm for yourself?
no.
Speaking of people in the government for the wrong reasons, Elon Musk and Scott Bessent literally fought each other apparently, and there was like a, a little scuffle, and Elon Musk apparently like rammed his shoulder and like body checked Scott Bessent.
Again,
So
this is
that's
like
kind
such
of
a lack of
interesting,
judgment. It's like, have you
right?
ever gotten into a fight with someone at work?
No,
No, no, I've never fought anyone at work. Like people who get in fights at work, like you're working at the White House, like you're gonna fight someone. Like, meet me outside, bro. Like,
yeah.
that's not the
To
kind
be
of
fair,
person.
Elon Musk is a pretty fightable person, I imagine. Like another, kind of raging egomaniac narcissist, and with a lot of money, and so he like doesn't get touched by a lot of things. Like things don't have to affect him. But yeah, would you like to fight Elon Musk?
No,
No, you wouldn't.
I don't want to fight anybody.
Yeah. But it is funny too, because it's like Trump's leadership style, because he's an idiot and he pits everybody against each other. And he does have kind of like a Darwinist approach to leadership, where it's like, it's really the person who talked to him last that like it has the opinion that sticks with him the longest. So kind of going with that, it's no surprise that there's constant infighting, and for all their efforts to stamp out the fake news and all the rumors and everything, like obviously everyone in the Trump administration is constantly bad mouthing each other, right? Listen to Steve Bannon, and he's not in the administration, but he wants to be again and was. But like, he's out there saying Elon Musk should be deported and like just
That
railing
is too
against
funny.
everything Elon Musk does.
That's a
So
horseshoe again, right? Elon Musk is
yeah,
he took over X and Twitter. Now he's saving American democracy. Now let's deport him. It's
yeah,
like literally the French Revolution. It's like they come for their own. You're
yeah, right.
yeah, you're a danger to the revolution. Yeah.
And then let's see. What do you think are the odds of Trump's foreign policy basically like a domestically and internationally? Like domestically, do you think there's a chance like America, like 3.5 years from now, of him like pitting blue states against red states, pitting everybody against everybody? Like, is there a chance he'll be like Buchanan, give a little historical comparison or contrast of just like handing the country off to Lincoln and like open civil war? And I'm not saying America will do like a second civil war, but will Trump basically like turn America into a dumpster fire of division and just hand off a flaming
No,
dumpster fire to the next president?
no. I think there's like a funny quote that people talked about, and it's probably not true, but Bismarck is alleged to have said like, God cares about like three things: babies, drunks, and the United States of America. And it's like, as bad as any individual president is, like America is still number one. And I think like in 3 years we'll be talking about the next election, and like I hope nothing bad happens in the interim. Like I think the good thing about Trump is
Yeah,
he's not really pro-war. He has some silly ideas than other leaders, obviously.
right.
But like, I mean, he's doing the things with like the tariffs because he thinks it's good for America. So at least like, while he's making a lot of money on the side, it's like he's wrong. I think, like, I think in my humble opinion that like his ideas on how tariffs benefit anyone are wrong. And so, but I don't know, the people around him, I guess they care about immigration a lot and they really care about trans people. So, I mean, I guess they're doing what they think is good. And I hope that they, are curtailed in their ability to do bad things in a year and a half when hopefully the control of one house of Congress switches. So we will
Well,
see.
that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. Is it like the government just too big and there's too many veto points and there's just too many people with individual laziness and like personal ambition that like the president maybe ultimately doesn't affect things as much as we want them to? Like
Yeah, I think
when
that's
our
a
guy
good
gets
thing.
elected?
I mean, the reality too is like the government's so big, and I think it's really funny. Like having experience like the Department of Defense, and it's just like, how do you get? I always joke about this at work. It's like how do you get 10 people to know something? It's like pick 10 people you work with. Try to get all of them on the same page. Now try to do that with 1 million people, and good fucking luck. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
like I think that's a saving grace. We have all these agencies. They're populated by all these people who most of them are career professionals who have expertise in the thing they're doing. Like it's actually really hard and competitive to get government jobs for the most part. Like you don't just walk up the street, go to usajobs.com and get a job, just because you put a resume in. It's like you have to tailor your resume, you have to show the
Well, yes
expertise.
and no.
So
Trump's kind of doing that now, isn't he? Like the
those are
the the
political
new guy.
appointees.
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah,
I'm talking
like if
about
you want to work in
regular government.
bureaucracy, it's actually really hard and competitive to get a job, and you have to show that you meet or like
Yeah, that's a
exceed.
good point. Right.
Yeah. So I will say the other thing too is just like let's just pick anything Trump wants to do. And he talks about this all the time. They call it the deep state. I'm not saying I'm a deep state conspiracy theorist or anything, but it's like it is true. Like you say, we want to do this, and it's like okay, how do we tell all the agencies that are involved? How do we make a committee to make
Yeah,
them
right.
work together? And it's like once you make a committee, you're half fucked anyway because like no one like who's going to be on the committee and like oh they don't have decision making power and then oh we're going to have to pass a administrative rule that's going to take 9 months and it's got to get reviewed. Then we got to wait.
Yeah,
Now it's got
right.
to go in the Federal Register for 45 days. And it's just like yeah, like if you're a president and you have one thing you want to do and you can't even get everyone to know what you're trying to do. You can't get anyone to do it, and then you have to wait 45 days to review, and then it's like, yeah, that's why every president
Yeah.
feels like
And then
they
you get
can't do
sued into
anything.
oblivion. Like
Yeah,
if you're trying to build something, all the NIMBYs get involved and sued.
yeah.
you know?
I mean, that's like, and the weird thing is, people say like, people say, "Oh, Obama's ruining the country, Biden's ruining the country, Trump's ruining the country," and it's like you literally can't. Like, good luck. If you want to ruin this country, it's actually exceptionally hard, especially if you like don't have control of
Yeah,
the full
that's true.
government.
And the 50 states are so independent where everything you're doing federally, it like,
Yeah.
some of that depends on like state governors carrying what you're trying to do and state legislatures. And then you get just, a bunch of maybe underpaid, apathetic bureaucrats that actually have to like go do where the policy or ideas like actually meet people and citizens and constituents. So that's
I would
interesting.
say
Do
like
you,
one thing I think Democrats should think about, and we've talked about this like many years in a row, but it's just like the idea that like, oh, Republicans want to cut the Department of Education. Let them fucking let Mississippi and Alabama have shit education, and then you know what, like Tennessee should do? Hey, Mississippians, like you may be 49th in education, but hey, we're 35th. Come on over, like
yeah,
and
right.
I don't understand why more mayors and governors don't try to do more to incentivize their own state and create the conditions which like we have 50 states, it's 50 experiments. It's an interesting little competition. And like, I don't like, obviously people who run for mayor sometimes are just rich people in a local municipality. And like, they probably have their own checks and balances as well. But I don't know. I find it interesting. Do you have any thoughts
Yeah,
on
that's
that?
kind of an interesting point. We have talked about that a lot in the past, but should we be a less federal system? Like, should Democrats be more pro states' rights? And like,
Well,
obviously,
not
states'
even more
rights is
pro
kind of a
states'
loaded
rights, but
term.
maybe more. You should probably like what are Democrats' list of priorities on what agencies they want to control and why, and what is the you can compare that to what is the most amount of resistance you face from Republicans, and if it's the Department of Education, it's like would you rather ditch the Department of Education and control the EPA and win the White House, or would you rather try to control everything? And create the most amount of resistance from special interests and big businesses and then have a coin flip of whether or not you're going to win the election. That's an interesting thought provoking
Yeah,
take.
no, and it's an interesting point too that I think Democrats, I guess, being the more federalist party and wanting the more one size fits all, help everybody kind of thing, and like being less pro like the kind of like state like 50 state laboratory kind of thing. Democrats do kind of take all of the political heat, like lose all of their political capital doing the thing for the entire country that red states don't want and are kicking and screaming the entire time, right? And then they get blamed for anything that like happened negatively. So, like for your point, should we get rid of the Department of Education and just let blue states start like mopping the floor in terms of all of the education metrics? Because red states are like, fuck that. We're not going to fund the same way like Mississippi can't fund their schools without all of those, block grants and all of the money that they're essentially getting from blue
We
states
don't
to
have to
tax
cut the
more and
block grants
raise the
because
revenue.
you don't have to cut block grants. Like you can cut large amounts of administrative burden as administered by the Department of Education. And then other
Yeah, but
things like
do blue states have a point though that like blue states raise way more money because they tax their people more and then do more services necessitating that? Should blue states be a little more selfish with the money? Like, a lot of red states are net takers, whereas blue states are like Massachusetts are net givers and have better systems and have better ways of life that would like, get even a wider disparity between red states if the federal government stops trying to force states like Mississippi and Alabama not to shit on Mississippi and Alabama every time, but like if you look at most charts of like societal problems, there's a lot of red that's centered in the deep South, right? Just kinda,
well, I mean,
not
I
to
will
totally
say
shit
to
on
be
those
fair
two
to like
states,
red
but
states, like there are still, you know, dynamic areas of red states that make a lot of money. There's people who, mining companies, there's cities in red states. Like while the state as a
yeah,
whole may be a net, taker from federal income
right.
tax revenues, but it's more complicated than that. But I don't know. It's just like when you're at work and like you're trying to, or in like your personal life, you have to prioritize things. And I feel like Democrats almost want to do everything by the most burdensome administrative state way or method possible and they try to get every special interest involved and it's just like I feel like you're just shooting yourself in the foot a little bit and if you really sat down and prioritize what department agencies you want to control what you want to do and why like the fact that like I don't know. This goes back to the lying thing again. Like, wouldn't like I don't know. Maybe Democrats should just say like, "Oh yeah, we're open to mining in federal lands and offshore oil. We're open to it," and then just like not do it because like, yeah, it's stupid. We don't want to ruin the environment. Like, I don't know why. Like, Democrats go like, oh, yay, we're going to celebrate like the fact that no one can mine anything in Alaska. And it's like, well, I don't know. That's probably not good. There's, for some reason, a lot of people in freaking, South Dakota who care about whether or not you can mine in the Arctic. There's a lot of people who live in
Yeah.
Florida who care a lot about whether you can mine in the Arctic. I don't get it. But if, like, are you going to lose an election over that? Like, just, prioritize. I don't know. They also don't prioritize their talking points or the way they do politics. Like every, speech and every little thing has to involve every little group and every little special interest, and they don't want to piss off anyone. And I think like,
Yeah, right. That is annoying though. Like every time like a Democrat's giving like a State of the Union speech, it's like everyone's analyzing. Like they didn't mention Pacific Islanders in this one paragraph when they mentioned everybody else. Like I feel like that thing gets really annoying.
well, I think it's really stupid because like even if you forget to write down on a speech Pacific Islanders, like yeah, they're still Americans. We still care about them. We still like them. We don't think they're like less than because we didn't mention them in a speech or because this policy or proposed bill in Congress didn't specifically call out every single marginalized group. I don't know. A lot of this is just marketing and like communication strategy for the political party.
Yeah.
They're
But going with like the
notoriously
50
bad
states
at it.
things, going with the 50 states idea of like a less federal system, if Democrats wanted to do a more kind of states' rights, state laboratory thing, do you think that would be good for Democrats if in a lot of
Well, I'm not
ways, like
saying
healthcare and education, that like the disparity gets wider and wider and Republicans can finally see for once that Republicans just constantly screw them over and like lead to a much worse style of life?
Well, this goes into the full strategy and prioritization thing. I'm not saying that they should give states rights for everything to do every type of little thing that we think or don't think the federal government ought to be involved in. I think it's picking and choosing, right? Like it could be that you like I don't know. This is like the communication strategy for like a political party, but like if you really would rather tackle climate change than like education, like I don't know. I'm gonna start rambling here because this isn't like a full thought out thought, but like to some extent, like I don't know. Maybe I'll just stop there. What was
Okay.
your question again?
I don't know. Well, I guess ultimately we're talking about like, will America be a dumpster fire at the end of Trump's term that he hands off? And
No, I don't think
maybe
it's
I think, yeah, I think we're
unless the
kind of both.
president start like launching nukes. I don't think you can really destroy this country, which is a good thing.
Yeah. What about the international order, though? Will Trump handle or hand off a world on fire, like in terms of Ukraine? Yeah, like Ukraine and Russia not being decided because he won't actually, he can't make a deal. Israel being a pariah state and Palestinians being displaced and like being shuffled off to like Libya or whatever
I
they
thought
end up trying to do.
I keep hearing people talk about that, and I have like a thought that like it's to some extent, like everybody, it's funny because everyone calls America an evil empire, but like we're the only ones with fucking agency and every single problem. Like the president doesn't wake up thinking, "Oh boy, I hope like nothing in Syria happens today." But you know what happens in Syria overnight is people go, "I want to kill my neighbor," and it's like, yeah, that
Right.
president sucks. And then it's like the president, what are you gonna do? And to some extent, like I don't know, I feel like the world being on fire, it's going to be on fire no matter what. Like the world is continuously on fire. There's continuously bad things happening. And it goes back to our point last week that if America disappeared, there would probably be like 17 wars within a year. And it's because of America that other countries are afraid that if they just start, doing a little genocide on the margins over here, that the U.S. State Department will complain and badger them to stop. And then there is a
Yeah, and if
credible
they keep doing
source.
it, like
Yeah,
all of a sudden you'll get bombers flying overhead, knocking out your little like jihadi camp in
yeah.
the mountains or whatever.
And
Yeah,
I mean, this might not be an unpopular opinion, but like we talked about how Israel and like Hamas and Palestine, like that is an intractable issue, and it's been made way worse over the last year and a half. And it's like, oh, what's the U.S. president going to do? And it's like, hey, here's an idea. Why don't Hamas fighters just fucking stop trying to shoot everybody? I'm not saying Israel's not at fault. Obviously, there are issues with the rules of engagement and the civilian casualties, but like, yeah, the president's not going to solve that problem. And like, there are a lot of people on this planet who just want to pick up a weapon and then go shoot somebody. And I think that's a bad thing. I'm
yeah,
against
right.
that. That is my stance. And I feel like, I don't think it's Trump's fault that bad things are happening. I think there are incentives for people to try to get away with stuff now more than there would be under, like, say, Obama or Biden. And I think they're pushing the waters right now, and it's probably going to happen. But I don't think it's because of Trump. I don't think it would be fair to say that like Trump is somehow causing he may not be helping, but like, it's like a positive negative thing. Like he may not be positively helping, but he's not negatively contributing to the fact that people in Iraq want to go shoot their Sunni neighbors or vice versa with the Shiites or whatever.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've got kind of a lot of ideas on foreign policy, so we might like bounce around a little bit. But I do like that idea. I guess one reaction to that is I remember in college I had a German roommate, and we were kind of talking about the Iraq War, and we kind I kind of like made a breakthrough where I like said something that he had never thought before. But it was kind of just that like America being the police state, the hegemon, the one with the like the liberal values trying to promote around the world, but it is the kind of thing where like America is expected to intervene everywhere, and we do get shit on for the places we don't intervene, for not fixing, maybe intractable problems like all the civil wars around the world that have been like, are ready to flare at any moment. And then we get shit upon for anything we do. Like we didn't do Iraq perfectly, right? Vietnam didn't work out well. There's like a whole list of things that we maybe didn't make worse. Maybe we improved a little bit, but we definitely, we didn't solve like Korea still is technically an ongoing war, right? There's a lot like everything we've done in the Middle East has had ramifications, right? But it is kind of an interesting idea where we do get shit on no matter what we do. And I do hate the idea that a lot of liberals in America have that America is like the evil empire, like you mentioned. And, everything is basically colonialism and capitalism that we are subjecting the world to. And if it wasn't for America, the world would be a peaceful place where no one would ever want to kill their neighbors ever again,
That's literally,
right?
yeah, that is the opposite of true. I think that is the most untrue thing about foreign policy. You could say that, but for America, the world would be a peaceful place. Like, fuck that.
Right.
Like, oh, but for nuclear weapons, like the world would be a peaceful place. It's like, that's not true. I bet nuclear weapons have probably stopped all kinds of wars. It stopped India and Pakistan from going like, full
Yeah, right.
waging war, like full war, like four times in the last like 80 years. So I don't know. There's a lot of dumb shit.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I always laugh about when you're thinking about like foreign policy or social science or anything. It's like people have all these opinions and they have no fucking idea of what's going on. And it's like, I'm not saying experts are infallible. What I'm saying is that experts are generally in the realm of reality and that like sometimes
Right.
they may be wrong, but they will be wrong for better reasons than you would be wrong for.
Yeah,
And when
right.
they're right,
That's a
they
good
are
point.
way
Yeah.
more right than you for the right reasons. And I feel like, I don't know. It's like everyone is entitled to their own opinion. We live in a democracy. Everyone can vote the way they want. However, it's like the idea that like there's a whole field of international relations and to be like they haven't figured anything out is silly to me. It's like we know
Yeah,
how states
right.
interact. We understand conflicts and how they happen. We understand like probabilities of how conflict ends and how
Yeah.
likely. And it's
And
to
people
throw
spend
that.
their entire lives studying the entire histories of why countries hate each other and have been, like know every detail about a war they fought in the 1600s or something like that. Like some people know that stuff. They might still be wrong, but they're more educated than you. I
Yep.
think about that a lot as my wife being a doctor and like with the vaccines and stuff. And sometimes my friends like will just pop off on like random conspiracies about vaccines and like whether it's like everything's big pharma. Keep like cancer is an invention by big pharma that we have cures for. But no company wants to be the because it's more profitable to just keep treating cancer. There's not a single company that would find some economic benefit being the only one with the cure for cancer. Things like that. But it's like you just look at someone who became a doctor and went through 4 years of medical school. And like, granted, there's dumb doctors, right? There's people who are a little bit lazy. There's people who don't stay up to date with like the latest information. There's like 80-year-old doctors that like maybe are not familiar with some of the developments. But like that person went through medical school for 4 years and I saw the books that like my wife read. I saw everything that she had to study, like hours and hours of every day. So I don't know everything about about the medical world and vaccines, but that is a person who spent way more time and energy and focus and money learning this stuff than I did. But like foreign policy is the like another
Well, I
perfect
mean, to
corollary
that
of
point,
that.
like your wife, if she makes a mistake, would be more able to understand why it was a mistake and to
Yeah,
understand
right.
where her thought process went wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I have this point here, this idea that kind of talking about foreign policy and like what America does and doesn't do. But like, let's take a macro view of the world, right? Like right now, sorry, specifically of Taiwan and China. Like, how long do you think that will be an issue where America, I guess, I don't know if we would really go to war to defend Taiwan. We've given them a lot of weapons to help prevent us needing to do that. And obviously, like we're reshoring all those chip factories that are so vital and important to the world economy in the 21st century that are made in Taiwan. But how long do you think that'll be a time, or that'll be a thing that Americans would maybe need to die for, like defending them? Is that something that, like, if you take a macro view of history, we should let China waste itself trying to take Taiwan, right? Like, if you look at a map of Taiwan, it's extremely hard to like do an amphibious landing. You got a lot of, like a million Chinese people having to go across like what 90 miles of that strait, like being
Well,
sitting ducks.
here's an
Like,
interesting counterpoint. It's like
okay,
this military historian I was listening to one time was pointing out really interesting little fact. Like he said, if you look in military history, like amphibious invasions don't fail.
they don't fail.
Yeah, because they bring so much force to bear that like it's going to succeed. That
Well,
doesn't
I
mean
mean,
they win
I
or they're
think there's a lot of
successful.
examples. Like, what about that tsunami or whatever that destroyed all those Chinese ships trying to
I mean,
invade? What was
that's
it,
like a
Japan or
freaking act
Korea?
of God. Yeah, but yeah, like no military is planning on a tsunami coming to hit their entire amphibious invasion
Sorry,
force.
I'm charging my phone.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, but
No, the,
okay. Well, I don't know. I've heard some compelling arguments, and again, I guess I don't. I'm
I mean,
not
they're
the
not going to
person
they
that.
make the decision. They're a communist party. They're not gonna bat an eye at like 800,000 soldiers dying. They're gonna be like Russia. They don't give a fuck. You think if Xi Jinping wakes up and says, "I'm gonna be the CCP leader who takes back Taiwan," you think he's gonna care about like 400,000 people dying? Fuck no.
Yeah, and with their demographics, it would probably be a good thing for their society to, like with so many extra males over females, it might even be, they might think it's beneficial. But do you
Which a
think?
little
Do you
shout out
think?
to the United
Well,
States foreign policy though is that like Taiwan wouldn't be a country if it weren't for
oops.
America. 100% if
Yeah,
America
right.
disappeared, Taiwan would be invaded in like 3 weeks, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think, I guess America should, theoretically spend a lot of money, troop lives, things like that, defending Taiwan? Do you think there's like maybe even like like a backroom kind of deal that like just give us a few years to get the chip making factories
No, I
built
think that'd be
elsewhere and then you
retarded.
can do whatever you want?
I think it'd be stupid. I think we should like it isn't when we talked about this last time. It is in America's interest to have functioning democratic capitalist countries having stable economic systems with people who have a good high standard of living, who can trade with us and create inventions and bring stuff to the market that benefits everybody. Like a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't think
Yeah.
in my
But
humble opinion,
but if you're president, would you like maybe risk a world war, right? Like Russia getting involved in Ukraine, and then China, distracting from that and Taiwan? Would you like what degree of defense of Taiwan would you go for? Would you put American troops? Would you expend all our missiles trying to knock out like Chinese ships? Would China going for Taiwan have to preemptively attack us just to give themselves a little breathing space, kind of like Japan did?
well,
Would
it's
they feel?
complicated. I think it's complicated, and like some of the way it would play out is kind of like would be messed up in my mind based on like just past tradition, like the fact that we don't recognize them as a country, the fact like I mean, right now China's constantly surrounding and Taiwan with ships and sending airplanes all over all the time. Like it's complicated. Would I be willing to like hypothetical if I was president? Would I be willing to risk nuclear war? Like I don't I don't know. It's an interesting, thought-provoking thing to start going down that road, right? Like ideally,
Yeah.
we spend enough on the military and have the military capabilities advanced enough where we can deter them from wanting to do it. And then, deterrence will hold. But once deterrence doesn't hold, everything goes out the window, as
Yeah,
many
but
people have
that's
found out.
yeah, but I kind of brought it up as in the macro view of history. Like let's say like 200 years from now, would it be a good thing? You're like, China's building up its military to be like a pure rival of ours, right? Would it be a
Hmm.
good thing for us to allow China to like waste its military that it's built up and is now maybe arguably a threat to American like not sovereignty, but certainly security and our kind of like military hegemony? Would it be a good idea for us to allow China, that's trying to be the number one world power that kind of controls a new hegemony that gets rid of all of these American institutions that we created, like the UN, the WTO, like, insert anything that America kind of dominates that countries like Russia and China don't want America to dominate? Would it be good for us to let China become a pariah state, killing like, I guess, theoretically millions of Taiwanese and, ruining their reputation among developing countries, trying to start like a new colony and pacifying, Taiwanese who don't consider themselves Chinese anymore. Would any of those things be good if you're looking at like like 200 years from now, historical wide lens?
Hmm. I don't know what the utility of like looking that far out ahead would be. I think that from a
Well, as in,
strategic
would it be
perspective,
like,
we're hamstrung by past decisions. I don't think it was smart to fully let them in the WTO, and I think as they started building up a military, we should have started to uh
you're
what's
talking about
that?
China, right?
Yeah, like I don't like after 2014, should we have not been trying to pull back some trade and sanctioning them after they did in Hong Kong, what they're doing in the South China Sea? Like I think there's a lot of decisions that were poorly made over like 25 years, and I think that China wants a fait accompli, right? Where they're going to say they're taking Taiwan back, and either we don't do anything, and then they take it without a military invasion like D-Day, or they decide we're going to go full D-Day on them. And so I don't know. It's complicated. I don't know. I mean, from my personal perspective, it makes sense to not let them do it. We should deter them. We should stop them from doing it if we can. And like, if in 200 years they surpass us anyway, which I don't think is likely anymore based on all the demographic trends and economic trends in China. So it's like, they talk about how it's like a 10-year window of danger or window of opportunity for China to do this. And I think there's a lot to that. And I think I think we should do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen because it's not good for us or good for anyone but China, or maybe even specifically Xi Jinping. Like, I don't know how much China would really benefit from, destroying Taiwan to take it. Like, it's like Russia and Luhansk and Donetsk. Like, how much are they really gaining? Okay, you have millions of mines in a tiny little area of land that you can't develop, or it's going to cost billions and billions of dollars to demine, and you've lost a million people for it. Like, I don't know. Warfare in
Yeah,
general is kind of stupid. It's like decisions made by stupid people with bad judgment, trying to, uh,
yeah,
you know, have self-aggrandizement about their ability to take land and
yeah.
hurt other
With
people and ruin their lives.
Right, and with Putin, you definitely have those like delusions of grandeur, of like czarist grandeur. Um, Speaking of Ukraine, there was like kind of they unveiled like plans that Russia has that like they don't really intend to end the war, and their war goals now are continuing to be like get more land and like take basically all of Ukraine to basically Kiev and even Kiev, like the what is it, the Dnieper River? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and
I
then
think it's
taking more land along the south. You like what do you think about that? Like the fact that do you think there's a certain point where Trump realizes Russia doesn't want an end to a war and what they really want is more territory and to carve up Ukraine into a rump state that'll be like powerless to ever kind of tell them fuck off ever again?
Yeah, well, I think this goes back to the conversation like 2 weeks ago about like stated preferences and what you're actually doing and the likely outcomes of what you're actually doing. Like, if you want the war to end, you should just arm Ukraine and give them everything they need. Because frankly, I think if it's clear that this is how the war is going to keep going for another 2, 3 years, like I think Russia would be willing. This is just a hunch. I assume Russia wouldn't want another 2 or 3 years of this exact same stalemate war going on. So I think Putin's probably, I think he's hedging on a bet that Trump and JD Vance will just be like, well, fuck Ukraine. We don't care. We're not involved at all anymore. And I think the
Yeah,
hope is that Europe won't be able to sustain Ukraine the way we can, which in some ways is obviously true. They can't. But I think Europe is going to be able to support Ukraine enough to like keep it a frozen conflict. And I shouldn't say frozen conflict, but like kind of the stalemate. If the war goes on another 2 or 3 years, I mean, I imagine there's probably some risk that Ukraine will just build a nuclear bomb or dirty bombs and sort of like, they've been very strategic about not going purposely after civilians in big cities in Russia. And I think that's
right.
obviously a good thing. It's the moral way to wage war. But like, if Putin's never going to end the war, that's probably going to change eventually. And,
Yeah,
obviously Ukraine's getting better at building more and more drones. So if Ukraine gets to a point where they're building 5, 6 million drones a year and they're just, killing tons and tons and tons of Russian soldiers and bombing all kinds of stuff in Western Russia, like I think the war is going to end eventually. And I don't think Putin's going to get whatever he thinks he's going to get. And I think his hedging on somehow, I mean, to me, he probably has more information than I do, but like it seems like magical wish casting that like Trump and JD Vance will just say we don't care about Ukraine, and then magically he's going to take over the entire country or more of Luhansk and Donetsk and or the Donbass, and I don't think that's going to happen. So it's kind of weird. I don't know. I think it's like he's just hedging right now. seeing if it
Yeah.
might last.
Yeah, doing the like kind of 200 wide view lens of history, do you think this is just a historic mistake for Russia that Putin's doing this, right? Like their economy is kind of in shambles. It's now increasingly dependent on the war, where they can't even, like, no one's going to be making money. So many jobs and so much government attention is focused on the war kind of machinery and the industrial complex. And then you look at their population problems where they're not having that, they don't have a good birth rate and like the shit life syndrome is taking off so extremely in Russia, while they already have a GDP per capita like lower than like Romania and Portugal and tiny little states that aren't pretending they're a world class superpower like Russia is. Like, do you think at a certain point Russia is almost like dependent on stealing Ukraine and taking all those people, and then like increasing their like horrific demographic problems by just swallowing up more populations?
I mean, I think those are goal. It didn't work out to plan, just like, other geopolitical blunders didn't. But I don't know. I don't know what the at this point.
Because they've lost like a million men, like, not all dead, but certainly all the ones who aren't dead in the million, like the list of million casualties are like missing limbs, eyes, they
Yeah, a lot
have
of
been
people.
maimed mentally and psychologically by the war. So like Russia is like, I've written like a 3,000 word essay on why I think it's still important to care about Ukraine. But it's just, to me, it's like you look at it in the wide view lens of history and like, this is just a historic mistake that will not make Putin look like some kind of land grabbing successful czar, but like just a total idiot who like just squandered any chance his country had of ever pretending that they're a superpower ever again. And then you look at these successful attacks that Ukraine is doing, like the this 1970s era Soviet planes that can handle the nukes that Russia is not even capable of making anymore, and Ukraine just does these successful attacks, like destroyed like 30% of them by estimates. It just seems to me like Putin's just like a total idiot that's just fucking his country senselessly.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, people talk about how any type of war is a miscalculation that could have been politically
Yeah, right.
solved to some extent.
Diplomatically, yeah.
Obviously, yeah, if he had been able to take over Kyiv in the first couple days of the war, everyone's like discourse about it would be totally different. But yeah, I mean, obviously miscalculated. Obviously, Ukraine is defending itself really well. They want to be an independent country, and what better way to ensure Ukraine's independence for in perpetuity than having a really shitty invasion of their country and making their lives miserable? I don't know. You got to go.
No, no, no. I got to open a bottle of wine here. I think we've got some pretty good time here. I just wanted to bring up, what are you reading? Are you reading anything good lately?
I'm
We
reading a
both
book
read
about
a
World
lot, so
War
I
One.
don't know. It's curious.
I'm
World
reading
War
a
One,
book about World War One, and it's like nuts how every
wine
country's
opened.
like professional military in 1914, what they had going into World War One was like decimated, and like pretty much every country's military, if you were a soldier in 1914, you were probably going to die. It's kind of crazy to think about. And then,
Yeah, do you find parallels between like the drone war that's taking over now, where you have even wider swaths of like no man's land, where if you step into this, you're
yeah,
just kind of
I think it's
fucked?
different. A lot of people are extrapolating about the Ukraine war and how all modern war will look like that, but I think it's probably not that accurate. I mean, I would like to hear what you think, but like I'll just say as an opening argument that, you know, most developed, industrialized, modern Western countries do not do meat assaults. They don't send thousands of infantry to go
Right.
die to try to take a couple square meters of land. And so in that way, like the tactics would be different. And also a lot of really good militaries don't really send in ground forces without like local or like regional or full air, superiority or supremacy. So the idea that they would even start a ground war when they can't really control like the cyber, the air, the sea, the subsurface, etc. So I think a lot of the lessons that, people who think they're smart, like Elon Musk saying like that's how all war is going to be. It's like that's not how America would fight. We would have complete
Yeah. Right.
control of cyber, of the sea, the surface, subsurface, air, and then the army would come in after basically anything that radiated, anything in the electromagnetic spectrum would be hit by a harm missile. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the Gulf War,
Yeah.
like anything that radiated any type of energy, we just hit with like what is it? Hazardous anti-radiation missiles or harm missiles, and like yeah,
Right.
we would shoot down all of their aircraft, we would hit all their tanks, and then once everything was basically softened up, then the army would go through. And if they mined everything, we would not send people through it. We wouldn't
Yeah,
send
right.
vehicle through mines. We'd find some other avenue. So, and the drone thing is interesting. Like, it's going to be a long cat and mouse game between types of drones and your ability to take them out. There's a lot of really cool companies doing some interesting stuff where like they're having drones that are like really big and strong and just like ram into every drone they see. They have like their own radar and they'll just hit every drone. So then
Yeah,
you're not
right.
wasting missiles, you're not wasting other drones. It's really interesting. So I think like everything, people underestimate America's industrial complex or military industrial complex, and the
Yeah,
way we fight, the way we advance technologically, the way we do things is just so different than Russia. I don't think there's
yeah.
necessarily a lot of good lessons to be learned.
No, that's true. Just in terms of
Well,
like
there
Russia,
are lessons to be learned. I just don't think they're super applicable in every type of military way of thinking of how you wage a war.
yeah, I do remember when the war started. Remember when like Russia, like all their troops got bogged down on the highways. Ukraine put up good resistance, and then there was
They
that
ran out
issue
of
of like
fuel and equipment
they
to
ran
even
out of
get there.
fuel. Their tires were all bad because they didn't do good maintenance. You obviously have the kleptocracy in Russia where the generals are just stealing all the money and like you think it's like canisters full of fuel for the thing, and it's like they replaced it with water and sold the fuel for money and things like that. But I do remember when Russia got bogged down and like couldn't take Kyiv, and like their best troops got like shot down at the like airport, like their airdrop, like paratroopers and stuff like that. It did make me feel a little patriotic, as in we might not have high speed rail, we might not have great health insurance, but at least we couldn't get invaded like that. And if we tried to invade a country like Iraq, we wouldn't lose and embarrass ourselves that way. So maybe not the greatest values to be proud of, but it's something. Um, I'm
Well, I
reading
mean,
a intro.
well, people talk
Oh yeah,
about the
go ahead.
military industrial complex like, yeah, like there are good aspects of having a highly professional, highly dedicated, highly intelligent, highly uh, educated group of people working on hard problems, and like working on them effectively, solving them, and then making arguably the country and the world a better, safer place because of it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my political ideological beliefs about America and patriotism. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like the military industrial complex, by its very nature, the fact that we can do it and other countries can't, it says a lot about our culture and the way our government operates and how we as a society function, which I
Yeah.
think is good.
No, that's
Like,
very true. And you take a macro view and you consider that like most of our giant technology leaps are because of military applications that can then be applied for commercial and like personal things. So like things like GPS, the internet, like all of these things that are really productive and make a lot of money for like the civilian economy, started off as military uses and applications and research and
or
things
just
like
research
that.
and development projects and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like materials that get used for all kinds of things. It's like figuring out ways to make like Kevlar jackets, or, like the space program, like was all dependent on making good rockets and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely true. I'm reading an interesting book. Oh, I thought I had it here, but it's called Simone. No, it's called The Woman Destroyed by Simone de Beauvoir. And kind of like an existentialist work. But I was just curious your thought on philosophy. I really got into existentialism in college, and like that was kind of the main philosophy that I really cared about. Like reading, I took a lot of college classes about psychology. And like, have you ever gotten into Plato or like the ancient Greeks, or do you have any interest in like Descartes or Kant or Heidegger or anything like that?
No.
Where do you go to? Do you read philosophy at all?
Not really. I took a
No, good.
class on Plato and Aristotle, but I wasn't it wasn't my best
Yeah.
academic performance.
Sometimes when it gets really into logic, I don't really find it that applicable. But I really like the
I mean, what do you
existentialist.
like about it? Like existentialism.
I mean, it's kind of like there's not necessarily a God that it's like kind of, it's not what you say, you're only what you do, because, there is you make essence out of existence. There's not some like preceding essence to all of existence, as in there's not like all of these rules that I think we necessarily need to abide by, but because we are technically like damned and abandoned by God and there is no God, that like everything you do is more important because you are what you do. Just things like that, that like, growing up like pretty secular, I never, didn't go to
I don't
church or
think the idea
anything.
is that you're damned by God.
No, it's the existentialist idea that we are alone and that we're technically damned and abandoned because there's no God. But that it's almost like a positive thing in existentialism, as in just there isn't. It's like essence preceding existence, like which is like the religious idea that there's things we need to live by. We don't have that. We don't have some like all loving God like overlooking everything we do and looking out for us specifically. But I don't know. That's just maybe you're not a philosophy guy. Maybe you're the wrong guy to talk about this, but uh, I don't know. Do you ever like stoicism? Like, there's kind of like a good trend towards stoic ideas right now. That guy Ryan
I think
Holiday is pretty big.
yeah, but I think some people take the long lesson or the wrong lesson. Like they act like, oh, I'm just going to burden everything myself. I'm going to be close to the world, and I think some of the way people respond to some of those ideas are probably flawed and not good for them in the long run. Like if you're like, I'm just going to be my own monk who sits around and does everything myself, like that's probably not a really good way to be a good, neighbor or spouse or
Oh
friend.
yeah. And that's something I find funny with this like trend toward like these guys. Like a lot of podcast bros will do this where it's like everything needs to be optimized in your life. And you get those videos of the guys that like regiment like every minute of their mornings until like noon. And then it's I do think a lot of times that like monk mode aesthetic is kind of you're just building a life where you can't possibly have a girlfriend or a wife or kids or even really like hobbies if just you're optimizing everything for like peak nutrition and going to the gym and you've just got everything so regimented that like at a certain point it's maybe like insane.
I think it's
Right.
human nature. We take everything too far. Like even if you exercise a lot, like you can exercise too much. You can eat
Yeah.
you can starve yourself. Like people on keto, it's like people. If you ever meet people on keto, they're usually talking about how freaking hungry they are and how miserable they are. And it's like, why don't you just try exercising more and eating like a little more vegetables? Like I don't know why you have to like starve your body. I mean,
Yeah.
it is. I'm not going to knock it if it's like got health benefits for people, but I think people in general, to your point or my point a second ago, is people take everything too far. People take religion too far sometimes. People take,
Yeah.
hobbies too far. They take health habits too far. It's like it's funny, like when you have a coworker who goes through like every health fad over like a couple of months, and you just witness it all. Like I've had
Yeah.
coworkers like
Right.
that. It's like I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep every day, and it's like okay. And it's like, oh, I should be getting 9 hours of sleep. And it's like, you really can sleep for 9 hours every day? It's like, that's why you're coming in late every day? And then it's like, oh, I'm keto. And it's like, yeah, I know. You keep talking about it. And like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like everything. Like if you're, oh, I'm a stoic and like, you're just never going to talk about your feelings. You're never going to like rely on anybody around you. You're never going to open up to anybody. Like I don't know. People have these like hilarious ideas of how to better themselves. And I think they take it too far and has the opposite unintended consequences or effects.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
But I guess the
Um,
philosophy is how to do that right, correct?
yeah. I had one more thought to bring up about the World War One book you're reading. A lot of people compare Donald Trump's personality to Kaiser Wilhelm II. Do you have any thoughts on that? Now that you're reading a book kind of about World War One, I think famously Kaiser
Eccentric,
Wilhelm II. He was
yeah.
like kind of like an egomaniac that like Trump had delusions that like only he could make deals with everybody, and he was some like genius, like four-dimensional chess strategician, and
Well, I
that
think
like
like
the outcome of it was basically that he like pissed off Russia. The whole idea with Bismarck was not having a two-front war, but he managed to like piss off Britain and France and basically turn them into blood brother allies against Germany, and then also fucked over like the Russian Tsar, like Nicholas II, I guess, or the third. And then like basically they had like a long kind of like a long going alliance with Russia that he screwed up because he himself was like just a total moron. Any thoughts on that in comparison to Trump?
well, it's like one of the funny stories that's often talked about Kaiser Wilhelm is that he would do war games with the German military and they would always rig it so he would win or he'd get like super upset. And I feel like if Trump were
Yeah,
intimately
yeah,
involved with war gaming in the United States
yeah,
military, he would be mad if he lost.
yeah, right.
But yeah, I don't know.
That's
I
kind of
mean,
funny.
to some extent, like there's just a lot of people who are kind of like prima donnas who get at that level. Like the Kaiser is unique. Like if you're born a king, like I imagine there's some weird
Well, he was like
psychological stuff.
Victoria, like Queen Victoria's grandson. So he like kind of like I guess nominally had or familially had a lot of like British sympathies, but then managed to
When he was
basically get
related to the
British.
Tsar of Russia too, so.
Yeah, I think they were like all. Yeah, I think most of the heirs or the monarchs were related
I mean,
somehow.
sometimes I think about this. Sometimes, like the degree to which like people 105 years ago, like were just kind of different. Like the one interesting thing that like kind of opened my eyes about this is like the idea of economics and like how the economy works, or like understanding how what happens when a recession happens, and it's like people's under because they didn't have words for it, they didn't have an understanding. Like you know, to some people the economy was bad because of the Jews. Like disease is happening because of the Jews. Like that's just
Yeah,
things that people believed, and like
yeah,
it's like you couldn't even explain it to them if you tried. So like the same thing with like I mean, we still have it today, but like the idea that like France and Germany and Russia and Serbia and Austria-Hungary and Italy were like constantly looking for like, how can I wage war with one of my weaker neighbors without getting everyone around me involved so that I can take the land and people? And
yeah.
it's like
So I
they
can
were
take
all
those
trying to do
villages
that.
down in those
Yeah.
valleys in the Alps or whatever.
I mean, at the beginning of World War I, like Austria-Hungary was like, oh, we can go beat up the Serbs for a while. Hope Russia doesn't get involved. And then the Germans, they're like, hey, Germany, will you help us if we go beat up the Serbs and, Russia gets involved? And it's like, they're all tiptoeing on the line. And, it's all bad stuff. It's like it's all bad behavior for human beings, right? They're just like, I'm in charge of this military and this government. I'm just going to go declare war on my neighbor and try to steal their shit. And it's like, yeah, it sucks. So to some extent, like I think a lot of people in the developed world don't do that anymore, which is a good thing. Like you're never going to
Yeah,
see Portugal and Spain go to war over where the fuck their border is. I don't think France is going to try to take any more. I don't think Germany is going to take back Alsace-Lorraine from France, and I don't think the UK is going to. The point being made, I feel like it's unfortunate there's still a lot of people out in the world who think that way. And one of the lessons of World War I was like every country was basically ready and willing to go to war if the situation was deemed advantageous to them at
yeah,
that
right.
moment. And it's
Yeah.
like none of them were, yeah. So I mean, it
And you
sucks
had a
what
lot of
happened.
countries trying to be world empires and get like colonial holdings all around the world. So yeah, like at that time, like literally all the countries were trying to fuck over their neighbors, steal more territory and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of going about how like I guess the West or America specifically kind of gets shit on a lot. Is like you like for most of history is like all these countries like having stupid leaders doing terrible things for stupid reasons, right? But then like I guess at a certain point in the 1800s, like suddenly then colonialism is bad because like the white Europeans have done it and they did it really effectively. But it's not like if you had just brought a shipment of guns to like some African warlord in like 1200, like don't you think he would have just gone off on all his neighbors, right? You look at like
Yeah,
the Aztec
absolutely.
Empire and all the, the only reason a small number of conquistadors were able to like take over the entire Aztec Empire and something that maybe people who just like colonial like modern day colonialism is the only thing they care about to shit on America. It's like all of the Aztec Empire's neighbors hated them, and they had like 200,000 soldiers from neighboring tribes that were like having their like virgins stolen and slaughtered and like just being subjected and exploited. So not definitely not excusing any terrible behavior, but like if you study history, it's like most of history is terrible behavior and everybody doing horrible things for selfish and like
Well, yeah.
delusional, egotistical reasons.
Well, they delude themselves too into thinking that they're doing good. Like do you listen to Dan Carlin?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well,
Is
yeah,
what is
the
it called? Something
hardcore
history,
history.
hardcore history. Yeah,
Yeah, he made an interesting point talking about Japan before World War II and like the whole like East Asia co-prosperity sphere. And it's like if they'd actually done that, that'd be kind of cool. Like helping all the Asian countries develop, modernize, get
but
investment,
by that
make
they
their
really meant like yeah,
get the
rape South
Europeans.
Korea,
Yeah,
steal
yeah.
everything in China.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's no different than like the UK, like a little colonialism, like you set up shop, integrate an area and people into the modern economy, and maybe you help them, provide school and sanitation, and then eventually they'll get people who know how democracy works, and then you empower the people to have their own local government. It's like, oh, that's a great
Yeah,
idea. Too bad it didn't work, and none of the countries really tried.
right. And
Yeah.
that's something that, like, the America haters, I think, should always remember that, like, after World War II, when we were like the lone hyperpower and we alone had nukes and we had this giant navy that was capable of just taking any island we wanted, it's kind of a testament to Americans that we did not like conquer the world. In fact, we spent all of our money, like all of our kind of like modern development world that would have made a better society. Like all of that money was spent defending and protecting the entire world, and just like not extracting like a whole bunch of concessions from all the countries we beat. And we built up our enemies into our strongest allies that made a lot of people rich and happy and more productive lives. And I don't think many, like, certainly the Roman Empire wasn't famous for doing that.
Well, the Roman Empire
The
was pretty
Spanish
fucking
Empire
famous.
wasn't, doing that. The
And the
British in the
Roman
front,
Empire would be like, "Oh, you knocked down a statue with an eagle on it. We're gonna go fucking kill all of you and take all of
yeah,
you women as like slaves just because you knocked down. Yeah, you disrespected the empire. Yeah, I mean, America does not do that. America is the most
right,
benign like superpower in like probably global history. That doesn't mean
yeah,
we're perfect, obviously, but I think we've done more. I mean, it's something Joe Scarborough always talks about. He said, "There's no country on earth in history that has fed and protected and saved more people on this freaking planet than
yeah,
America. No other
right.
country, the Soviet Union wasn't like feeding people. They weren't giving, there's no, to my
Their
knowledge,
people
like
were
this
starving and
China.
they were actually refusing our aid. We were trying to
Yeah.
send them food because we knew their people were starving during their great 5-year plans that kept failing.
Yeah. And when America engages with the rest of the world, they have a bunch of diplomats from the State Department come and badger everybody about how they're not respecting human rights and gay
Right.
rights and LGBT. And it's like, that's a good thing. It's like, yeah, that's good that Americans care about that. And I don't know. There's not a lot of that. I don't think Putin is really protecting minority rights. He's like single-handedly plucking them out of their villages to send to the army so that people like white, what Muscovites don't have to go. It's kind of
Right.
weird
Yeah.
on that note.
Any last thoughts? Think we're
Yeah.
probably pretty good to wrap it up.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Spoke a piece. Anything you
Well,
want to
last thought I have, and this is kind of like
okay.
the point about it's like a rhetorical question, but I always wonder like people say government doesn't work, and one thing I was thinking about today, while I was thinking about what we talk about on this podcast, it's just like if you think government doesn't work, like doesn't that just mean you're a bad manager? Like if you're a Republican, you're like government doesn't work, and if you really think about it, like money solves a lot of problems, and the United States federal government has more money than any other institution on earth. And it's like if you can't solve problems, like maybe you're just really shit at like managing people and organizations. Like if you there's really not that much different like organizationally between like a company and the government, except like the government's not out to make money and they're not inuring money and giving it to people. But like it's still just managing people. So I don't know. To some extent, like I understand that managing a big bureaucracy with 2 million people is extremely complicated and very hard to get everyone on the same page doing things in a strategic way. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Just the idea that like if government's an organization, so if you think it doesn't work, maybe you're just really bad at managing people.
Well, I mean, that's certainly true. Like you had a good point the other day that like we are citizens, we all pay taxes. Shouldn't you get something out of it? So if you're a Republican just going around, like you're, especially like if you're in government and you're in charge of like oversight and doling out money with like the people's purse in Congress, like you really are just an idiot, right? Like you're telling me that like Mitch McConnell, who's been in Congress for like what, like 45 years or something like that, 45 years. And then like Kentucky, all these years later, still is like the number one place of poverty at like the county level, right? Like, doesn't that just mean
Kentucky,
Mitch
the most
McConnell?
impoverished state.
No, like Kentucky has like, is famously like, most welfare, the most poverty in counties, like a lot, like it
Yeah.
has more counties in like the top 20 poorest counties than any other state, I believe. Like at
Hmm.
a certain point, can we just admit that like Mitch McConnell's a terrible senator then, right? If
Well,
he
that's not
like
even
fucked
his
over his own
job.
people.
Like
What?
members of the Senate from a state just get like corporal spending. They're not like managing the day-to-day operations of a state. They probably had a string of bad governors. It's also complicated because like a lot of states like outcomes like economic and demographic are kind of tied to geography and the people that live there. Not saying that they're like the people are worse, but like, if you don't like live in a river or have industry or have rich people who miraculously sprang up and decided to stay instead of move to New York City, there's a lot of things that go into it. And probably Eastern Kentucky with the Appalachians is probably heavily dependent on coal in the past. So I don't know. It's probably really complicated. And ironically, the solution to that, in my mind, is that the government should use some of the $6 trillion they take in revenue and give it to Kentucky and help some of those states. I don't know. But
Yeah,
that's like managing an organization,
don't
right? You're
disagree. Yeah,
managing a country. If you're managing a
right,
government in a country and $6 trillion, like what are you getting from it? Some states get
right.
more than others. Some states have
Yeah,
terrible outcomes.
and if you're the person going around saying like things like the government should be like strangled, right? Like it should be small enough that like things like the entire tax code should fit on like a postcard like this size. Like
Well, if your strategy is to eliminate every block grant that the federal government just gives with like no strings attached to states, like that's probably not an outcome that's going to help impoverished places.
yeah,
That might be the 2D chess or the, 1D chess that people play thinking that some people are bad at.
yeah. Well, any other last thoughts? Should we
No,
wrap it up?
just kind of
All right.
tailing off, isn't it?
Yeah. Now you're. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is the Halfway Cafe. Our podcast is called Brain Milk, with 2% fat. So thanks for listening. Hopefully this is productive and informative or entertaining at least. And
I don't know if it's productive.
you get 2% fat with it. So if it wasn't perfectly ideal, or maybe we rambled here and there, that's the 2% fat. But keep paying attention to the Halfway Cafe. I got a nice article I'm going to post tomorrow joking about what to expect from Donald Trump's birthday military parade. So I'm kind of coming up with ideas right now. So that'll be fun. Thanks for paying attention to our satire, our Brain Milk podcast, and check out any of my books, Satire in the Trump years, Satire in the Biden years, if you like my comedy and want a whole lot more of it. Anything you want to plug? Adrian, you fine? Nothing to plug as usual. All right. Thanks for
Thanks,
listening,
Mike.
everybody. And come back next time. We're going to try to do this like maybe twice a week. So I travel a lot. So maybe it's sometimes hard to stick with a set schedule, but I am interested in growing these lives and this podcast. So keep in touch. Thanks, everybody. See ya.